I've been playing on my Xtreme Onechunkin account for almost 7 years now, and I have to say that sometimes it feels like I'm Sisyphus pushing that boulder up the chunk hill, trying to complete every chunk in the game, and then Jagex comes around and doubles the amount of chunks in the game with the release of Sailing, and the chunk boulder rolls back down the hill. Sailing was released a month ago and people had a lot of questions of how chunk rolling would work, or how I would go about obtaining the 99 Sailing skill cape. So I've decided to put together this little video so all those questions would be answered. First of all, to start training Sailing you need a Pandemonium quest. I'm not really a fan of locking skills behind quests, but oh well, here we go again. The quest is pretty simple. You need to sail around towards the Pandemonium, then you'll get booted off the ship, you'll wake up on the Pandemonium, you get teleported to the shipyard, which is under the Isle of Souls. You then sail to Port Sarim and back, and quest complete. As a little aside, there are saws on the Pandemonium and the shipyard. I don't know if this is going to be handy for me in the future, but I don't know, maybe I can finally build an altar if I get there. Before you arrive at the Pandemonium though, you can actually sail around a bit. As you can see on the marked chunks on the screen, if you go too far you actually get booted off back to Port Sarim. But that does mean you can take a couple of routes to the Pandemonium, and all the chunks on these routes can be unlocked before you actually get to the spot where you progress in the quest. As you can see right now I have Port Sarim already unlocked and I can unlock all of these chunks before reaching the Pandemonium. Getting more chunks would be very beneficial to training Sailing later. If I don't roll these, then Sailing is gonna be harder because I'm gonna have less sea chunks. So I will have to roll my way towards the Pandemonium. So about these first few chunks, there are a couple of interesting things. The chunk to the east of the Pandemonium has to be unlocked, otherwise you can't get to your ship to complete the quest. And unfortunately the shipyard where you upgrade your ship is to the south of the Isle of Souls. It will be a little disconnected part of my chunk map. There's no other way, you just need to get to the shipyard with a teleport, otherwise you can't progress in the quest and you also can't actually train Sailing from that point, because you have no ship, and of course you also can't lamp the skill before completing the quest. As a little side tangent, I really love that I can now legitimately unlock the tutorial island chunks. People have been telling me to just put them on unlocked because I've been there before, but didn't feel right, and now I can just unlock them by ways of unlocking the little waterways around them. So the chunk map is gonna look a lot cleaner with that, that's nice. I also unlocked the Temporos minigame before. The chunk where that was in has moved to the south, and where the chunk was before is now the Pandemonium. So that chunk has to be moved south and I'll unlock the Pandemonium later. I've touched on this a little bit, but I'm gonna explain myself further. The way I do chunk rolling is like this. I can unlock any chunk that is adjacent to my chunks. Teleports and boats do not unlock adjacent chunks unless there is no other way to actually get to that chunk. Some examples include Karamcha, I can only get there through the boat, or the Isle of Souls, which previously could only be accessed by using a teleport from Edgeville. I really like this way of rolling chunks because you get a nice clean chunk map, which is good for the odds, and it leaves you with a nice intuitive map. It's easy to see what you can and can't do in your chunks. However, Sailing completely changed this. I can now go over the water to all these islands that previously I only could unlock with teleports or with the old ships, which were essentially just teleports with a ship next to them. For B, this means that the previously rollable Void Knight's outpost and Isle of Souls will now have to be accessed by my own boat. I'll have to roll a path through the ocean towards these islands, otherwise I won't be able to access them. However, this does not mean that I have to unlock the entire ocean from the adjacent chunks to Port Sarim and the Pandemonium. I can also moor a boat at another port, for example Relica, and from Relica I can go out into the ocean and get to the other Fremling Isles like Waterbirth Island. There are some interesting exceptions to this rule though. You can't access Great Courant by boat without visiting Great Courant at least once, which you have to access from Veos. The same goes for Varlamore. If you actually want to enter Varlamore by boat or by land from the rest of Seiya, you actually have to complete the Children of the Sun quest and go to Civita Elafortis with the giant bird. which is located east of Ferrock. Of course, I already had the Great Coran docks unlocked, but it's nice to see that I wouldn't have to sail all the way to Zeya to actually get to those chunks. As of recording this video, so this might change later, but some oceans are not actually sailable yet. All of the eastern oceans are currently unavailable, which means that if you want to get to mostly Harmless or Fossil Island, you'll just have to use the old-fashioned route. Of course, they might add some mooring points to those islands in the future, but I do expect that you need to visit the islands at least once before you can actually dock there with your ship. Of course, that's a little bit of speculation on my part, but I think they'll get the same treatment as Great Courant and Varlamore. With chunk rolling out of the way, let's talk about a lot of chunk related grinds that have emerged as part of sailing. First of all is the 99 sailing cape. People asked me, Limp, before you enter the Pandemonium, do you have to actually get to 99 sailing with those tiny XP drops you get from trimming your sails? And the answer to that is no, because I do not have the 99 cape unlocked before I actually step on the Pandemonium. And when you step on the Pandemonium, you cannot train sailing anymore. You can actually train it again when you get your raft from the shipyard, but at that point you can just sail to Port Sarim and back and finish the quest and train sailing normally. But of course the 99 sailing cape is on the Pandemonium, so when I finish this quest I'm gonna have to train it to level 99 with only the little starter region I've then unlocked. It might be a lot, it might actually be very minimal. We don't know that yet, but what I do know is that it's gonna be slow. It would surprise me if I get a lot above 20k XP an hour, which is not much, but by no means do I think this is a death chunk. I estimate it will be a little casual 700 hour grind, nothing to be too afraid of course. However, there is a chance that I actually get a very rare situation in which I get absolutely destroyed. And that is because a couple of months ago I rolled a Warriors Guild, and next to the Warriors Guild are the Virgin Islands, the Max Cape chunk. And if I roll the Max Cape and I have the Herblore chunk unlocked, which means I will have 99 Herblore, and I am no longer Slayer locked, which means I can train Slayer, and I do not have the Pandemonium quest completed, that means that I'll have to get to 99 sailing by catching wind next to Port Sarim, just going back and forth on this tiny piece of water, maybe getting 1k XP an hour or something. Maybe 2, I don't know, until I get to 99 sailing and can get the Max Cape, which is probably gonna take over 12,000 hours. And yes, I would consider that a death chunk. That is absolute insanity. I'm really hoping there's like a mechanic that after a certain level, maybe 50 or something, you stop actually getting XP from catching wind in this boat, but I don't think that actually is the case. I think you can get to 99 in the tutorial quest of sailing. So if this very, very obscure scenario becomes the reality, I am absolutely fucked. Some things I've been testing on my alt account is if you can attack monkeys or other NPCs on land from your boat, and this doesn't seem to be the case, which means that I can't unlock Slayer again from my boat by killing some monkeys or kill any other NPCs that are on land which I cannot walk to yet. There are now a lot of sharks and other NPCs that drop a couple of collection log slot items. A good example would be the bull shark, which drops fishy salvage, which actually gives some collection log slot items if you actually use it on a salvage station. However, you can't use that before the quest, so that we'll have to wait until you finish the quest, because you can actually attack sharks from land, it is just extremely slow. Another interesting thing that can happen when you're training sailing is that a giant clam can show up, and if you give it an item with a large high alch value, it can give you a radiant pearl or any other of these pearls you can see on screen. And of course, those are collection log slot items, so I'm gonna have to collect all of them. Of course, I still have a lot of revenant totems, which I can chisel down for ether, but I can also use them for this because they have an insane high alch value. I think that kind of covers all of this. I actually really enjoy this update. You might think, Limp, don't you think that it's a bummer that now, for example, you can't go to the pest control island and get a void set, because that would be very helpful. And yes, that's kind of a bummer, but I really like the way the islands now all connect to each other, and my map just becomes this big blob that's just expanding outwards. instead of having all these little exclaves in the ocean. I don't know how else to call them. I don't know what to say. I like to keep my chunk map as one big whole instead of all these tiny little things. But we all know that the main reason is that it's soothing to the odds. But if you have any questions about sailing or how this will affect the account, please leave them in the comments and I'll give you a little answer. And of course, as always, a big thank you to the channel members you can see on screen right now. aka Roommate, Poggies, Decodedlar, LB Kellner, Kelden Nichols, Faber, Atlas K, UIM Evan, Enros, Snockball1, Unsliced, Loxins, Penguin Meat, Jurn Scullen, X2 Light, Sam, Kurnai, JVH92, Carlos Rivadi, J-Balls, Apex Eternals, Rennek, Scrump, Brandon Nielsen, Tyler Contrino, Iron Wire, Reese Benden, Sidestar, Josh Nador, Sifu, Mitchell Chamberlain, Ajax, Austin Gazellin, Manam the Good, Sean the Sheep, Timbus, Me Eat Books, Gengar Legend, Rabby, Redford, Tank Killer, Sir Slaughter, Icaro, FHNN, Dale, Grunt Life, Rhino Child, Michael Lots of Numbers, Lost, Michael Wolf, Biggest MHG, Frixis, Sheep, Captain's Mast, Baked Egg, Jacob Jones, Wolf K, Bob M40, By the Pigs, James C, Not Now, Arthur Brosse, Henry Schwegler, Colin, Cheems, Potato for the Win, Benji, Tim, Mercury, Jake Barger, Lucas Swartz, Thomas Molina, Avars Bertelsens, Andres, Catcrawl, Death to Communism, Sneaky Fox JM, Gabe Kukla, Oliver Voss, Lucas Valley, Duncan Willis, Control Troll, OB, The Smout, James Bailey, Ripkin, Blank, PB Bizer, and of course all the other amazing channel members you can see on screen right now. And a Merry Christmas, lads. Don't drink too much eggnog.